This morning's reading is taken from the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians, chapter 12, starting at verse 4. Now there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are varieties of services, but the same Lord. And there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who activates all of them in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. To one is given through the Spirit the utterance of wisdom, and to another the utterance of knowledge, according to the same Spirit. To another faith by the same Spirit. To another gifts of healing by the one Spirit. To another the working of miracles. To another prophecy. To another the discernment of spirits. To another various kinds of tongues. To another the interpretation of tongues. All these are activated by one and the same Spirit, who allots each one individually, just as the Spirit chooses. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Well, I decided that one of the problems when you talk about gifts is, as a minister, if you're not careful, you always end up sounding like you're haranguing the congregation, saying you're not doing enough. So I'm going to tell you a little story about me, and it sort of involves what's lurking over my shoulder, which is Jesus. Many of you know that I'm visually impaired, and for many years I actually stopped doing art. I no longer painted, I no longer drew, I no longer did anything, basically because I was struggling to understand what I could see. And whenever I tried to do anything, I ended up trying to paint something that I thought other people would see. And it became very, very frustrating because obviously that wasn't what I was seeing. And so I stopped. I didn't paint anymore. And then when I went to the theological college to train to get a white piece of plastic to go around my neck, I met a wonderful person called Bola, who was a ceramic artist and painter. And she challenged me because she said, actually, it isn't about what you think other people see. It's about what you see. Now, that may sound very obvious, but that actually led to me coming back to painting and drawing. And this is one of those paintings. It's actually a painting. There's two of them. The second one is more traumatic, so which is why I haven't put it behind me. And this one is actually called The Disabled Christ Risen. And there's a whole conversation we can have about that, but we're not going to go there now. Sometimes we need to be challenged about what our gifts are. And sometimes we need to be asked why we're not using them. And that's what happened to me with Bola. It's that thing about challenging me to actually say, why aren't you using this gift? And this gift can express so much, not just of who you are, but who God is. And this is the wonderful passage in Corinthians. Paul is talking about the gifts that each of us have and the gifts that are given to us through the Holy Spirit. I love that in verse 7, in the translation I'm using here, it says the Holy Spirit is given to each of us in a special way that is good for all. And that's important, that the Holy Spirit is given to each of us in a special way that is good for everyone. And then Paul goes on to talk about these different gifts. There's wisdom and knowledge and faith and healing, and some to perform miracles and some to give prophecy and others to tell spirits apart. And at the heart of these, though, is the fact that Paul is saying, but each one of you will receive this differently, but it is for the good of all. Within the church, we need to recognise that often the gifts we have, the ones that we use every day, are also gifts that we can bring to the church. And I think it's interesting that Paul starts with two. He starts with wisdom and he starts with knowledge. And that's important. I think that's important because what he's actually saying here is, don't look at the gifts of prophecy. Don't look at all of that. Actually, what have you got? And I know through looking at our church, you actually see that there are people here who are accountants, who bring their skills of maths. You know, we've got Eleanor who does our accounts. We've got those who bring their skills of IT, like Steve. We've got those who bring their gifts for children, like Anna and Annie and Julia. And it's about how we bring what we use in the world also to support our church. We find ourselves in a strange place at the moment, in the fact that we're not meeting together physically, though, you know, as you will have heard me say, we are still meeting together, and we are perhaps dealing with a reality of what it means to worship God across generations and across time and space. But we are also in that situation of saying we have times of change coming to our church. There have been people in our church who for many years have done an incredible task. They've bought their gifts and used them to the glory of the church. But there's also time now when they rightfully feel it's time to step back. And this for us means that we need to say, what do we do now? We have the parish magazine that has run for 150 years. And the team editing it, that have been doing it over the last few years, have felt that it's time now for them to step back. And if it's right for other people to step forward and take this on. We have people in our church, the Friends, who have raised money which has gone towards the redevelopment that we're in the process of doing now. Many of those have said, actually, it's now time for us to step back. And so the challenge is for us, who out there is willing to step forward to take on the fundraising, to bring it into a new way, in new directions. We also begin to look at how we do worship and what we do next. There's a conversation in the PCC at the moment about how do we reach out to young people and young families. And looking out there saying, for me, it's looking out there and saying, if you've got gifts to bring young people, if you've got that relationship, that trust that you can build with young people and young families, please bring them to us. If you worship in our church, we need you. That becomes the miracles that we are looking for. That becomes the gift of tongues that we are seeking. In this time, we've had space to step back from the way our church normally is run. And the challenge is that where we want it to be? As the redevelopment comes towards its end, as we look towards having a new sound system, some of the things we need to look at also is what has happened. I find it amazing how many people are coming to us for these recorded services and for Live at 5 who do not come into our church and yet feel a part of it because of what we're doing. We have also set up things like our phone service so that those who can't get out of the house, those who are now at the moment isolating, but many who are housebound, can actually engage in worship through listening to worship on the phone. These are things that we now need to consider. The fact that our sermons are looked at all the way through the week are things we need to consider. And so when we talk about God's gifts, I'm actually saying, all of you out there, what has the Holy Spirit given you? Your special gift that you can bring to this, our church, to bring God's kingdom to Gedling and to Lamley. This is where we are. There are different kinds of gift, but one Spirit. And I'm always remembered in that line, once you say there is one Spirit, and in the one Spirit we were all baptized. That is where we are. That is what we seek. For you who are artistic over this period, can I remind you of the practice platform that Jean has set up? That your art and your songs and your films and whatever, your knitting, your crochet, your embroidery, all of that can be brought to us so that we can do an exhibition to show how the Spirit is used this time in our church. But also to each of you with your gifts, please prayerfully consider how God is calling you to use them. Because he will be. For the good of the church and for all people, he will be. Amen.